Okay, today we're going to be talking, having a roundtable discussion on net here, and we want to hear from those of you on 20 meters and from Zoom about THC and CDB edibles. But before we get into the edibles themselves, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the societal factors. We had a part one where we got started on this last week, and we talked about some of the societal norms and influences. And when we talk about societal norms, we have to realize that those things do change over time. I mean, think about the history of alcohol, gambling, payments to college athletes. I mean, these are all those last two things. It's hard to escape because anytime you watch any kind of a college sport now, you get a whole different feel than a few years ago. And now the big schools are spending a lot of money to get college athletes of the highest caliber and this semi-professional in such a way, which is certainly a much different norm than in the past. And what about stereotypes? Have the stereotypes about marijuana changed through the years? The people that consume, I mean, back in the 1960s, is it the same when someone was a user or somebody who smoked or ate edibles of their own baking? What was the stereotype of that type of person as compared to what the reality is today? And what about this from a standpoint of personal liberty? Is it all a medical issue or is it also a personal liberty issue? And what's the effects on society and the effects on law enforcement, prisons, demographics? I mean, it's still illegal nationally, technically on federal law. But what about, the state from state and all that? We'd love to hear from you that are checked in and anybody that's listening on 20 meters. You don't have to be a member of the Medical Amateur Radio Council. We look forward to your participation. So we'll do late check-ins when it's time on 20 meters fast. For those who would like to make comments, we encourage you to participate. But marijuana can be addictive, and some people who use it do get addicted, according to Medline Plus .gov. And they're not able to control their use, and they need it to get through daily life. But again, it says some people, and addiction can lead to tolerance. And tolerance means you need more and more to get the same high feeling. And if you stop using, your mind and body may have reaction. And these are called withdrawal symptoms, which include feeling fear, unease, and worry, feeling stirred up, excited, tense, confused, or irritable, agitation, trouble falling or staying asleep. And by the way, the material that I'm using as a prompt and having this interactive discussion here on our net is published to our healthcarehands.org website. So if you go to Healthcare Hands and you look at the post section and you open up the post section, you'll see the post. We started this last week. So you can actually open that up and you'll actually pick up the slides that we're prompting off of. That will give you more of a feel of a presentation more than a discussion. But again, this is 20 meters, this is a net. And what we're having is an exchange on a 20-meter net for those that are checked in. Now, in 1936, there was an anti-weed or marijuana film, propaganda film called Reefer Madness, and you certainly can look that up on YouTube. You can see reviews about it, you can see shorts about it, you can see some advertisements about it, you can see the full movie. It's a cult classic, and of course now, in our different norms and our different times, it's seen as a humorous example of the propaganda and indoctrination that surrounded the use of cannabis in the early 1900s, because many of you were probably in talking to grandparents, maybe even great-grandparents, found out that some of them actually did have marijuana in their background. So it's not something that's necessarily new, just became more of a cultural icon during the 1960s and anti-establishment. We'll talk more about the Vietnam War momentarily, but distributing reefer madness in college campuses in the 1970s helped to bankroll the burgeoning film company New Line Cinema. So that's another purpose that it had. And this, you can watch it now and you can give your own review if you like, but the question of the time was, is marijuana a gateway drug? And back then, that's what we were taught in school. I mean, I grew up in Miami, and of course, Miami, I had friends that were users. I wasn't growing up as a young teen. I was, of course, exposed to it like most people in Miami and tried it. It didn't really do anything for me. And actually, the opposite occurred. Some of my friends that were heavy users got exposed to me not being a user, and they became very successful and really backed away from the use and considered it part of their teenage years and not something they wanted to rely on. And of course, some of them also found other methods to satisfy themselves, religion and such. But the very answer depends upon your response. Is it a gateway drug? Well, now even the experts are divided on this, and I'm not going to go there. But that certainly was the excuse that was given, because heroin was a big problem in the 1960s, and that's what we were told in Miami that it led to. So if you go back to YouTube and you look for the movie Up in Smoke, which was a 1978 movie, the premise of that movie was that Cheech and Chong were the actors that starred in the movie. They were making they were importing marijuana from Mexico, and they built a van made out of marijuana. So it's it definitely part of the times. If you watch now, you can reflect on the 1960s and 70s, and they were unknowingly smuggling a van, they said, made of marijuana, but they were stoners. They were those stereotypes we're talking about. I mean, I remember the one line for me that I found humorous. They mentioned this last week. Is one of them asked the other what he was smoking because it was so good. And the guy said he was smoking Labrador, and the Labrador said, "What's Labrador?" He said, "Well, that's my Labrador ate my stash. He recovered it. It's what he was smoking." I thought that was humorous, but there's just jokes and jokes and jokes, and you can of course see that if you go to the slides that we have up on our healthcare hams website, you open up the slides from the PowerPoint, you'll actually have active links. You know, that's the advantage of preparing this way. When we do a slide presentation that's available on our website, not only do we get you the visuals, but we get all the embedded links. So if you bring up those slides and you click on an image, or you click on a hyperlink text, you're going to be directed to the source material. And especially when you get into science, that gives everyone a chance to investigate to the level that you would like to, because here on 20 meters, this is public airwaves, and we tend to direct our discussions in our net and our interactive part of our net to topics that everybody can relate to. But there's a lot of science for the healthcare professionals that they would like to consume, and that becomes available then through the hyperlinks. Yeah, I'm going to break one here for ID and take late check-ins. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, AA4FL net control out of Hawthorne, Florida. Open to all amateurs to grand rounds of the internet. I think you get a gist of what we're discussing, and you might like to check in if you're monitoring on 20 meters. And we encourage you, you don't have to be a member of the Medical Amateur Radio Council. Make your call at this time to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, no further check-ins. It's looking back at the influences of the 1970s, we talked about Cheech and Chong. The pop culture influences like Pink Floyd and music, the Grateful Dead, Led Zeppelin. You know, 1970s ushered in a new perspective on drugs, from rock and roll to disco. We talked about Cheech and Chong, there's others. It's this anti-establishment counterculture helped shape the history of marijuana as we know it. As hippies faded into the 60s, Nixon started the infamous war on drugs, and the new era of subculture began. But during the 1970s, and we're going to have Dave talk about this here, KN0S, what happened with the troops when they returned from the Vietnam War and the cannabis that they came back experienced with. So at this point, I'd like to turn the microphone over to KN0S. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Go ahead, Dave.
Vietnam, people were returning, had experienced marijuana over there. Interestingly, I was at the VA hospital in the early 70s, and we had some of the soldiers who had lost limbs using marijuana for phantom limb syndrome. Earlier, we had done some research at the University of Iowa in the College of Pharmacy at the medical school, and we were looking at the active ingredients of marijuana. We had different high yield THC marijuana and we were trying to extract to find out what the active ingredients are in there that make it sort of a pain reliever, also a sedative, and some, of course, the moderate addictive potential of marijuana. Once people start using it, they like it, and they like the effect. Interestingly enough, that research has continued here in Virginia at Virginia Tech. They're still trying to come up with high potency marijuana for primarily CBD. The CBD, of course, is the legal form that many states have adopted, and that research is ongoing, looking at the active ingredients, the medicinal properties of marijuana. But many of the soldiers, it was interesting, as they returned from Vietnam, they also found that it was beneficial. It does affect your sleep, however. It affects sleep. We found that out. Whether it causes hallucinations or not was hard to tell because they were often mixing other drugs with the marijuana. It was an interesting phenomenon watching the guys. But there was some evidence to show that for the people that lost limbs, that they actually, it did help the phantom limb syndrome. It sort of blunted the effect of that so that they wouldn't try to get up out of their wheelchair and suddenly just fall over thinking that the lake was still there. I got to witness that several times. The soldiers there at the VA hospital in Cincinnati, where I was doing my fellowship. Anyway, back to net. This is KN0S. Back to WB5 Delta.
Okay, well, thank you for the explanation, Dave. KN0S, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, the Medical Amateur Radio Council Club call here in our Grand Rounds on the Airnet. And of course, Dave, when those troops returned from the Vietnam War, there were different types of cannabis strains, I would imagine, from all around the world that were brought back with them. So, and of course, the other drugs that you mentioned too, that might have been partially responsible for the gateway thought. But Stuart is with us, WA9ZPL, and Stuart, I believe you mentioned that, and Dave was talking about research. So tell us a little bit about some of the problematic issues when it comes to doing scientific research on this subject. Go ahead.
Well, it's almost impossible to do scientific research on marijuana in the United States because it's still forbidden by federal law, and it's a Schedule I controlled substance, so it has no authorized usages under federal law. And if you try to get an exception cleared to conduct such research, it's almost impossible, and the process of requesting an exception can take years. So we turn to Canada, and in Canada, the Canadian government did put out something. I posted the link last week on the net, and briefly, the issue is that the modern day marijuana that you could get legally in the US, in many states, and in Canada has perhaps 20 times the amount of tetrahydrocannabinol, the active ingredient, compared to stuff that people were using 20 or more years ago. And this has translated into an increased risk of people developing a chronic psychosis. As you may know, people who develop chronic psychosis, either schizophrenia or related disorder, it typically starts in the late teens and early 20s and eventually affects close to 1% of the general population. However, the Canadian experience recently is that this goes from the 1% up to about 4% in people who use the modern day version of marijuana. So you're talking about an increase in serious mental illness factor of 4, and this doesn't seem to get much press coverage.
Okay, thank you. WA9ZPL, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. That was an excellent description. And we do have a psychiatrist here with us on the net today. Chip, N5RTF, would you like to reflect on what was just said by both Stuart and Dave? And also tell us from an all-ins perspective about marijuana and sort of your history clinically with your patients. Would you mind talking about that, N5RTF?
I'd be glad to. I lived through most of that era and watched it firsthand. Never got really involved in a drug culture myself, but I had friends that did. And then I had many, many patients who did. There are people that think that marijuana may contribute to people developing schizophrenia. But schizophrenia is a brain disease. I mean, you can look on an autopsy slide and see entire layers of cells that are just absent, and marijuana can't do that. More than likely, people with early prodromal schizophrenia just feel bad and attempt to self-medicate with whatever they can find, and then people will point to that later as causal, but it's just coincidental in most cases. Now, for ordinary people, I always told my patients, I said, is your mother's couch comfortable? Because you're going to be, that's where you're going to be when you're 50 years old, if you keep smoking every day. The biggest problem with marijuana is just a lack of motivation. People just stop caring about things. Now, that keeps them out of trouble. It's certainly better than having people on crack cocaine racing around the streets and shooting each other. But it doesn't do much for society. And if people have responsibilities, say they have children or they have a job or what, they're just not getting it done. So that's the problem with marijuana in all forms. N5RTF.
Yeah, thank you. N5RTF, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. We appreciate that perspective. As we get into some of the research, and once again, if you go to healthcarehams.org, and I assume non-members have access to the posts. There is a post that has the link to the slides today. If you don't see it there, you're welcome to go on QRZ and email me. I'll be more than happy to share that link with you. My home call is Alpha Alpha 4 Foxtrot Lima. So if you would email me my QRZ email address, I'd be more than happy to pass this along, because again, these links are available and you can get into the original articles and read a lot more detail than we would choose to discuss here on 20 meters on our public airwaves, because we don't want to discuss science and medical detail at the doctor level when you perhaps don't desire hearing that. We give you the option to make you aware of the research. So there was an article on potency and therapeutic THC and CDB ratios in the US cannabis markets and the overshoot. Some of these products that were being consumed as low content CDB, and the contents were actually more significant than they thought they were, which could contribute to issues. So that was in a journal of ethnopharmacology, and you're welcome to read that. It's in the Frontiers in Pharmacology. If you would like to look up the original research on the internet, the original article was from June of 2022, and you look it up under the article name of Potency and Therapeutic THC and CDB Ratios US Cannabis Market Overshoot. We encourage you to look that up. That's the way here listening on 20 meters that you can. And as you go into the article, you'll see where they talk about the two most prominent cannabinoids that are in cannabis, which of course is THC, CDB, and CDB is not supposed to produce acute intoxication, and has been proven to also have some therapeutic benefits, particularly in children, anti-inflammatory. So all this is still undergoing research. You'll see current articles. This first article was 2022, but some of the upcoming articles we mentioned were more current than that. And again, if you go on the internet and do internet searches, just be careful of your sources, because you can find anything from all types of sources that not necessarily speaking to science or truth. And in the edible market, just try searching for THC edibles or CDB edibles and see what you get. I mean, you know, you may get 50 pages. Yeah, I don't know how you figure out which ones to buy. I mean, I looked at a few of them, and the descriptions were amazing. How marketed they are to the general public, and what they're promising, and how customizing. I mean, in the form of gummies. I don't think you want that around your house with children. All you need is a child to pick up a bunch of gummies and eat them. But the conclusions of this particular article is, despite the distinct goals of medical and recreational cannabis users, medical and recreational program product offerings are nearly identical. So patients seeking therapeutic benefits from herbal cannabis products are therefore at a substantial risk of unwanted side effects, regardless of whether they obtain the products from medical or recreational programs. And efforts are needed to better inform patients of the risks associated with high potency cannabis and the interaction between THC and CDB, and to help the policies that promote more therapeutic options. Let's go ahead and take a pause and take any questions to date or late check-ins here on 20 meters. I'm going to allow you to go ahead and call in to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta with either those late check-ins or questions. Go ahead and make your call.
Kilo Fox 8.
The Kilo Fox 8, repeat your call.
Kilo Fox 8, Echo Fox Tango.
Yeah, Kilo Fox 8, Echo Fox Tango. Thanks for being here, John. Did you want to check in, or did you have a question? Go ahead.
Just checking in. I just stuck up a brand new random wire antenna. I'm just trying to see some contact. Start looking at the whole competition on.
Oh, well, thank you. Right now, conditions don't seem particularly good. You're 5x8 here in your random wire antenna. For those of you that are listening here on YouTube, you're getting to hear amateur radio and the advantages of being an amateur radio operator. Can you imagine in an emergency situation where cell phones go down, how communication would occur? Well, you're hearing that here, and we're using it to discuss subjects of interest. So amateur radio nets are groups of amateurs that talk about subjects that they have a passion about. It may be model trains. So in our particular case, it's topics related to healthcare. And we encourage you to consider amateur radio as a hobby, if not for yourself, perhaps for a family member. It's a great hobby for preteens and teens. It fits right in there with those science based learning that they're having, robotics, etc. And it's extremely important now in your education and children's education to be exposed to those parts of the curriculum. So this is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, the Medical Amateur Radio Council club call here, the Grand Rounds on the Internet. Do we have any other comments on 20 meters? Go ahead and make your call. Do we have any questions or comments from our group coming in by Zoom? Go ahead and make your call by call sign.
This is Stuart, WA9ZPL. I uploaded things to the chat on our Zoom session, similar to last week. I don't know that these will be preserved, but they're available as long as the session is ongoing here.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. That was W9ZPL. So do realize that Stuart had put in a link. Stuart, what was the actual description of the link, in case those that are listening on YouTube might want to do an internet search for it, because the links aren't active on the YouTube video. What would they use as keywords to find it on the internet?
The Canadian Mental Health Organization, so it's CAMH.ca would be the starting point.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we may actually have that here in our conversations. I've seen that article before. Yeah, well, thank you for making that available, Stuart. So if you're here coming in through Zoom, look at the comments on Zoom, and you'll be able to pick that up. If you're coming in through the YouTube video, you'll be able to search for that on the internet. Thank you very much. We talk about the molecular and cellular mechanisms or the actions on these cannabidiols. And I don't, how do you pronounce that, Stuart? You're much better at it than I am.
Tetrahydrocannabinol.
Cannabinol. Okay. Well, maybe maybe I'll get that right. You know, I can mutilate words, so I appreciate a proper pronunciation there. Thank you very much, Stuart. That was WA9ZPL. For those of that are on YouTube video, Stuart, can you tell us a little bit about your location and how long you've been a radio operator?
Well, I've been an amateur radio operator for over 40 years, and I'm a physician specializing in geriatric medicine and general internal medicine here in the Chicago suburbs, retired as of May 1st.
Congratulations on your retirement, Stuart. That was WA9ZPL. And this is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, AA4FL at the microphone using our club call, but operating out of Hawthorne, Florida today, my station. So as we talk about the molecular and cellular mechanisms of these actions, it's a 2023 August article, and you can find that in the Molecules. It's MDPH journal. It's available on the internet. I also have the link to that if you're able to go on healthcarehams.org and look for the slides. And then if you look through the abstract, it goes through all the details about the plant used for centuries for both recreational and medicinal properties. And the CDB, according to them, lacks a psychotropic effect. So that's the reason in the edibles to use CDB or in legal marijuana rather than the THC, because THC has shown great therapeutic potential. And the question is, the CDB also do the same? And this article starts to look at the molecular actions of them. And it's an active, different active cellular and physiological process like inflammation and oxidation damage and fibrosis, excuse me, you wet my lips here. Molecular targets where it exerts its direct influences or channels that are listed in this particular article responsible for the effects and blocking the transduction of chronic pain by affecting sensory nociceptors. I guess that's not me to pronounce it correctly. Modifying intracellular concentrations of calcium and resting potential of excitatory cells and profoundly affecting the inflammatory response by increasing anti-inflammatory cytokines and decreasing pro-inflammatory cytokines. So as you go and look at this, if you really want to get into the science of it, and I personally am a dentist, I mean, I'm interested in the science of it, but I'm more interested in the cultural aspects and the health overall, but not as a researcher. I'm not a dental researcher on the use of this in dentistry pain. But if you'd like to delve into the details here, you can, and it goes into a lot more in the conclusions, unraveling its pharmacology and therapeutic potential. But they do mention that several gaps in knowledge, of course, this is a 2023 article, still persist, and it's clear that it interacts with various cellular mechanisms, but they still don't know the precise mechanisms of the action. That's elusive. So furthermore, the existing knowledge predominantly originates from preclinical and cellular models, therefore raising concerns regarding genetic and physiological variations between species or models that might influence outcomes. So if you think about that, you think about every individual having their own genetic makeup, and anytime a drug is given, it may have a different effect on each person. So there's factors such as dosage, metabolic profiles, the timing of administration, interactions with concurrent medications that can produce modifications of its real-world implications. So even though there's studies, it doesn't mean it's a study that's directly related to you in exact form. A lot more research is needed. And for our part one of this discussion last week, you know, we talked about that in a lot more detail about the therapeutics and being individual use and targeted to individuals. You really, this is not medical suggestions. This is not a discussion between your doctor and your patient. This is just discussion of a subject that you need to pick up with your healthcare professionals whether they be mental health professionals, whether they be cardiologists, see what the impacts might be on the heart. That's something we're going to talk about here momentarily. Now, there's so many implications in the body whenever a drug is introduced. Look at all the ads that are on TV for medications. By the way, that's another shift in cultural norms. In the 1960s, they weren't advertising to the general public medications, but if you watch any kind of news right now on a mainstream network channel, and you watch these commercials, you'll get a 30-second commercial, and 20 seconds of it are side effects. So you get a chuckle out of that and consider the norms. I don't know. You just got to talk to your medical doctor.
Jay,
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stuart for some comments. WA9ZPL, go ahead, Stuart.
so these TV ads are what are called direct-to-consumer advertising. And there are only 2 countries in the world that allow that, the United States and New Zealand.
Amazing. Well, we talked about liberty and the desire to market, and I think we can look at attorney ads with the same set of eyes. That wasn't an acceptable norm 30, 40 years ago. And I'm sure there's many more. So when you get groups of individuals who want to advertise and they convince the Federal Trade Commission that it's in the best interest, you're certainly limiting not to do so. And these types of activities happen. Are there any other comments about that particular subject on 20 meters? Go ahead and make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on advertising in general, not just necessarily go ahead, on this subject? Make your call on Zoom here, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Comment.
Okay, I believe we have KN0S that would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Dave.
One of the ads that I just saw recently on the internet was from Elon Musk's company about the CBD gummies, and he was giving those away. But if you actually go to the website, you have to pay the shipping, of course. But that's again, everything's showing up on the internet that pops up on your emails, and we're being inundated. You can't watch. I never watch commercial television. I watch public television a little bit, but I'm not much of a television watcher because of all the bloody ads. But that CBD ad for Elon Musk's company on his gummies came up recently, and of course they can sell those to kids. Parents can buy them and their kids get them, of course. So what do you think of that? Back to Ned.
Well, I think we're getting back into that personal liberty. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Not everything's in the best interest, but you got to have regulations and restrictions. And we live in a world where we don't like government to be in control of everything. And then, of course, that's the argument on many other subjects where they are in control of certain aspects of our life. And the counter argument is, why is it okay for one aspect to be regulated and not another? So it's a complicated world we live in. And we're here again having a discussion on 20 meters on the public airwaves. And we hope you find the conversation interesting. That we had talked previously about maybe having a discussion with your health professional about these subjects. Maybe you need to have a discussion with your legislator at the state level, your federal legislator. And personally, yes, as Dave said, you've got to be careful with children around. Is there anybody on Zoom that would like to make a further comment about this subject? I'll pause one for that.
I have a follow-up.
In just a minute, we'll give the mic to Stuart, but the Kilo 1 station, go ahead and repeat your call.
Yes, Kilo 1 Tango Oscar Jeff.
Hey, Doug. Thank you for being here. We'll put you in as a check-in, and we appreciate your comments. What would you like to say, Doug? Over.
Thank you for taking the call. I must say, this is the first time I've been aware of your net. I just want to commend everybody for a thoughtful conversation. It's really great to see thoughtful conversations going a little bit deeper than what's typical. On the subject of medical marijuana and the use, and there's been such a large shift in the U.S. to legalization, decriminalization. I have yet, and I'm not an expert by the way, nor am I an MD, but I'm curious if anyone is aware of what is the smoking gun you would expect with a big signal health impact to the general population that, if you compare, for example, to cigarette smoking, unambiguous signal, you can do controlled studies. But I see a lot of anecdotal, incremental, I heard the comments on chronic psychosis earlier. To me, that's important information, but it doesn't suggest a controlled study, which is what would these individuals who are beginning to use or abuse marijuana products, what would they otherwise do? And so, the standard is well-controlled clinical studies. I'm wondering if anyone on the net can comment on what maybe the strongest evidence is there that gets close to a controlled study that would suggest either positive or negative outcomes for people on things that matter. Oh.
Okay, thank you very much for being here, Doug, and for the comments and input. Earlier, we had a little bit of discussion about the problematic nature of being able to do studies here in the United States because of federal laws. So I'm going to let Stuart pick up the microphone and take over here and have a little bit of discussion about that. And I'm sure you heard your comments and questions and might be able to elaborate a little bit further. WA9ZPL Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Go ahead, Stuart.
So a quick follow-up to the comment we all just heard. If someone is not going to use cannabis, what would they otherwise do? That's a difficult question to answer. Historically, alcohol was the go-to product. And of course, for people under age 21, alcohol is not legal, neither is cannabis. But if you go into an open meeting of Narcotics Anonymous these days, the people who attend are younger than the people who attend meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they tend to mix. They use anything and everything. There isn't a single substance of abuse that doesn't come up in these meetings. Now, to change the subject, the question came up, what would happen if a toddler or a young child accidentally took a gummy that contained tetrahydrocannabinol? Many of us used to watch the well-known TV series ER, and now there's a new TV series with one of the same actors, Noah Wiley, that's on Max. You have to pay to watch it, but it's called PITT, P-I-T-T, and it depicts doings in an emergency room in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's why it's called PITT. And in the initial series that dropped about a month or two back, there is a sequence involving a toddler who comes into the emergency room in a state of coma or stupor for no reason that is obvious. And after study, it turns out that he had put a single gummy in his mouth that hadn't yet even completely dissolved and was causing this almost coma in the child. So it's already hitting mainstream media. Back to you, Jay.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Doug, K1TOO, do you have any follow-up comments or questions? Go ahead and make your call to WB5D.
Yeah, I guess, I'm not surprised that use of any pharmacoactive agents is going to be associated with healthcare risks. There's no doubt about that. The question is, we're bombarded with, I was listening to the earlier discussion, we're bombarded with, I think the right term is nutritionalism. So you can go and eat a big bowl of Cheerios and feel good about it because it said on the box there's no or not no trans fat. Well, it's been right to the population. People are convinced that things are doing good for themselves when they're really not. You probably shouldn't be eating the Cheerios in the first place because of the carbs. So a lot of confusion. So I'm not surprised that if you look under the streetlight for issues associated with cannabinoid usage, that you're going to find it and that it's real. But the question is, what's the right control? And I'll just give you an anecdote. I was up many years ago in Vancouver for a Bruins. I'm in the Boston area, and the Bruins were playing the Canucks. And I just happened to be up there for a meeting, and I watched the crowd. This very contentious game, and they were an incredibly well-controlled crowd, not like maybe what we would see here in the U.S. And even though there were some reports, if any of you had any visibility into that, there were some, trash barrels that were lit on fire. But I was just observing that the crowd was very well controlled, but you smelled, marijuana smoke. Everybody seemed to be smoking. They didn't allow any alcohol in the city limits whatsoever. So it was just an anecdote here, and I don't want to take too much oxygen. But I stood up and I just watched this, just observing it and thinking how different it is. And I don't want to inadvertently reveal the identity of this individual, but I stepped up on a sort of a little rise, looking out at the crowd. And next to me is an individual who is a very prominent politician in Vancouver. And I said, I'm really impressed. I said, don't tell anybody. I'm from the Boston area. I basically said, I'm impressed with the crowd. I said, a lot of pot smoking though. And this individual said, we actually like that. We like that because it reduces the amount of bad behavior, violence, those sorts of things. And it just occurred to me at that time that, here are benefits that are not going to be acknowledged in studies that are looking for only risk. And that's the thing that hasn't sort of come out. It hasn't gone that I've seen, and I'm not an expert, but if there was something really smoking gun here that would put on an even playing field, the benefits, societal benefits, epidemiological benefits versus the risk, the studies that focus on risk, I think we have a better understanding of the value proposition of recreational use overall. Over.
Yeah, thank you for that comment and that discussion thread there, Doug. We had mentioned earlier, maybe before you had logged in, that part of the research issue here in the United States is federal laws and getting dollars for doing research and marijuana-related topics. And this is even, before now we're running into research dollars being an issue overall. So Stuart had mentioned earlier that we thank our Canadian brothers and sisters for doing some of the research, and perhaps and it's a shame because I think about Boston, I think about the education system in Boston, all the wonderful colleges and all the brain power that's there. You would think these are some of the questions that would be answered. And, from a commercial standpoint, as we go and put our other hat on, or certainly look at it from the other part of the thread, if you were somebody that was marketing this, you might want to support research that's going to come out with a positive, but you certainly wouldn't want to promote research that's going to come out with a negative that's going to harm your cause. So the commercial interests could be there to fund research, but you're not going to get that fair, well-balanced research. Any follow-up to that, Doug? K1TOO, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Thank you for the comments. And your name is Jay, if I have that right. WB is fine. Just thank you. I wanted to thank everybody involved with the event. It's just great to see. I'll be listening when I can going forward. And thanks for the thoughtful discussion.
Well, thank you, Doug. And by the way, my home call is Alpha Alpha 4 Foxtrot London. And just for ID purposes, Medical Amateur Radio Council, Grand Ransomware Net, we've been in net for many years, well over 15. Our organization has been in existence since 1966. We're an ARRL affiliated club. We do have two websites. The one you should look at is healthcarehams.org. And Doug, if you go to our YouTube channel, Healthcare Hams YouTube channel, we take our simulcasts that are done through Zoom and our 20-meter net, and we actually generate videos for the general public. That way, the general public finds out about subjects of interest. And obviously, us here, we have a passion for health-related subjects. Sometimes we also do talk about our other passion, which is amateur radio. But in making these YouTube videos, it gives the public a little bit of an idea what amateur radio is all about. So I didn't know if you're aware of that, and do we have your permission to have you as part of one of these YouTube-based videos that we're going to produce, Doug? K1TOO, AA4 Delta Mike for Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Yes, yes, you have my permission. You know, as I was listening, came across your web today for the first time. I tried to get to the YouTube channel. I did not see, I'll check it again. I'm sure I can find it offline. I don't want to take the next time on this, but Healthcare Hams, is that .net? If you could just give me the URL, that would be helpful.
Well, on the internet, the URL is a .org. But on YouTube, it's just go to YouTube and search for Healthcare Hams channel. Over.
Okay, Roger on that. And thank you again for taking my call and the good discussion. I'll be listening. K1TOO.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug. K1TOO. As we go further into the research, and we'll talk about another study. We're not going to dwell on the science. We'll let everybody go in and do your research. But on that molecular study, so and this gets back to what Doug and what also Stuart were talking about. The endorsement of cannabis-based medication poses unique regulatory challenges due to the intricate nature of cannabis and its derivatives and the regulation of legal restrictions in different countries. So as the scientific understanding of CDB and its therapeutic potential continues to evolve, regulations then are likely to adapt and become more accommodating if benefits outweigh the rest. Now, Doug, I didn't ask you your background, but in our particular organization, we're not all healthcare professionals. We have attorneys that are members, we have airline pilots that are members, and we're an open organization to all amateurs because, after all, everyone's interested in healthcare and their own health. But back to this particular article, overall CDB has been shown to have a wide range of effects. One's mainly described as beneficial, becoming an attractive potential treatment for a variety of acute and chronic disorders that involve autoimmunity, inflammation, tissue repair process, or augmented oxidative damage. And that's an article that in Molecules magazine, and you can find that. It's an August 2023 article. You can search for that. And this particular one was the National Institute.gov had it referenced. And you can find that on our slides on the healthcarehams.org. I'm not sure if the posts that have the slide links are available to the general public or not to members, just in case you look and don't find. But you're always welcome to email me at my QRZ email address, AA4FL, for any of the above. But new research, we're talking about brand new research about heart disease, current, we're talking about May 2025, found a link between chronic cannabis use and endothelial dysfunction, a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So use of it could be chronic use of it could be bad for your heart. But what was surprising in the study is whether or not you smoke it or consume edibles, according to the study. And they found evidence of endothelial dysfunction at upstream risk for cardiovascular disease in cannabis users, regardless of how they use the substance. So there's a growing body of research suggesting that cannabis is not benign, but once again, more research is needed. And if you continue to investigate yourself, this particular study was in May 28th, 2025, in JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association Cardiology. So it's a trusted source. You may only have access to the abstract on the internet if you're associated with with an educational institution, you can probably search for the details there. But this is an ongoing study, and that finding, that surprised researchers was the vascular function of those that chronically used edibles. It was actually over 50% reduced when compared with non-users. So those that smoked actually had a reduction of function of only 42%. So, I mean, the conceptual thought here before was edibles are seen as possibly less harmful than smoking or vaping marijuana, but this new study by JAMA's cardiology suggested, well, that may not be the case. So what about the international perspective of use of cannabis? And you hear about this quite frequently, people that end up in other countries, and the background of the regulations in those countries is much different. And if you go to Trends magazine, so we can actually look up in trends in psychiatry and psychotherapy, I believe. The article is the current state of cannabis use policies across 16 research across 16 countries, cross-country comparisons and international perspectives. I'm trying to see if we've got the date here. I don't see where I've got the date on this particular information that I have, but it's certainly past 2020 because I reference articles between 2010 and 2020. So you can look that review article up and read it yourself. But in the public venue, I mean, you know what happened to Brittany Griner, the WNBA star in Russia, got 9 years on drug charges because she was in possession of having some cannabis vape cartridges in her luggage she inadvertently took. So you've got to be careful in other countries, even if it's a therapeutic, you've got to be careful. Now, you better not deal in some countries. There was an article recently on Singapore, and this was from 2023, May of 2023, where they hanged 2 citizens in 3 weeks for trafficking cannabis, despite the calls to halt execution. So just be aware of that there is an international factor here. And thank you for consuming this presentation. I'm sorry about the bad pun about consuming, but we do appreciate this, as well as discussions on other health-related subjects that you might find as you visit the Healthcare Hands YouTube channel. And you're welcome, of course, to email me with any questions. We appreciate everyone being here. Let me go ahead here and just stop our recording.